Our thoughts are with their families and friends. The decision by Al Jazeera to broadcast such material is deplorable, and we call on them to desist from future broadcasts of such a nature. I appreciate that all media outlets have a strong desire for the exclusive, but we have no desire to limit journalistic freedom in any way. However, all media outlets must be aware of the limits of taste and decency and be wary that they do not unwittingly become the tools of the Iraqi regime. Over recent days, UK forces have been extremely active. The Royal Navy, the United States Navy, including mine clearance Dolphins, and Australian naval forces have been involved in a massive operation to sweep the shallow waters leading to the port of Qasr. The Royal Navy have taken the lead in this operation as they are acknowledged as the world experts in this type of work. Additionally, divers from the Royal Navy and the Australian Navy have been clearing the port area. The mine threat to shipping in the Khor Abdullah has so far prevented humanitarian aid from being delivered by ship to the Iraqi people. Make no mistake, the threat is very real. Last night, UK mine hunters discovered and then detonated 2 mines outside the swept shipping channel. This proves beyond doubt that Saddam's regime has attempted to stop essential stores and humanitarian supplies from being delivered to his own people. This also illustrates his disregard for civilian shipping, which may have encountered these mines. The close cooperation between the 3 coalition naval forces has cleared a channel, but the overnight discovery of mines just outside the swept channel may now delay the arrival of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Sir Galahad, and her cargo of over 200 tons of aid donated by both the Kuwaiti and UK governments. The humanitarian aid includes bulk food, such as rice, lentils and chickpeas, flour, bottled water, and World Health Organization medical packs. In the interim, essential humanitarian supplies are being delivered over land. Turning now to land operations, 3 Commando Brigade and the US 15 Marine Expeditionary Unit have completed operations to mop up the last remnants of resistance on the Al-Faw Peninsula. They have secured Qasr, and 3 Commando Brigade are already starting the process of normalization. You have all seen remarkable TV pictures of the Royal Marines engaging with the local population. After decades of repression from Saddam's regime, it is a testament to the professionalism of our forces that the Iraqi people are getting their first taste of freedom. Life is already moving on. There are already children being born who will never have to suffer under this regime. 4-2 Commando are now sweeping the town to remove weapons and explosives left behind by Iraqi forces. Most of you will have seen the coverage of weapons finds within a school in Qasr. While life is returning to normality for some, there are of course still many others who have yet to be liberated. Elements of 7 Armoured Brigade and 16 Air Assault Brigade have been in action over recent days around Basra and Az-Zubayr. In both these locations, UK forces have been taking the fight to the remnants of the regime's paramilitary forces, including the Special Security Organisation and the Ba'ath Party militia. When we put together the force package for this operation, we knew we would have to deal with regime paramilitaries. Our force was therefore designed with this in mind. The UK have developed highly effective and experienced infantry and Royal Marines who are expert in this type of operation. The regime paramilitaries are beginning to realise the level of our expertise. In Azubaya, members of one division took swift and crucial action in the early hours of 26th of March against these forces, killing around 20 personnel, and in a separate action, they captured a senior Ba'ath Party paramilitary official. There is still regime paramilitary activity in this town, but at a much reduced level. UK forces are dealing with the remnants of it on an opportunity basis. In Basra, we've come up against some stiff opposition from a mixture of regime paramilitaries and the remnants of the Iraqi Army's 51st Division, who we believe have been coerced by the regime to reoccupy their equipment. On Tuesday, one UK armoured division using AS-90 self-propelled guns and destroyed 11 firing positions for heavy mortars, D-30 artillery and some T-55 tanks, and they were on the outskirts of the city. Later that day, a column of around 20 armoured vehicles left Basra in an attempt to engage UK forces. They were destroyed by a combination of AS-90 artillery, coalition aircraft including Tornado GR-4 and Harrier GR-7, and 3 Commando Brigade using Milan. As darkness fell on Tuesday, UK forces saw the first signs of overt resistance to the regime's grip in Basra. Sporadic small arms fire was reported in one area of the city, and regime paramilitaries started firing mortars and artillery at their own people. UK artillery responded by destroying these regime artillery and mortar positions. The Ba'ath Party command element was also effectively targeted in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Basra was calmer throughout the majority of Wednesday, but again a column of Iraqi tanks and armoured vehicles left Basra heading southwest towards UK forces. Having established that these forces were not trying to surrender, UK forces took swift and decisive action against this threat, destroying a number through a mixture of artillery and coalition air power. The people of Basra are starting to recognise that UK forces will deal decisively and on our terms with the remnants of the regime. Elements of 7 Armoured Brigade and 16 Air Assault Brigade have secured the Ramallah oil fields, and our explosive ordnance disposal teams are continuing the difficult and dangerous task of clearing the munitions and booby traps that the regime has left behind. Coalition and Kuwaiti firefighters are dealing with the wellhead fires in a systematic and effective way. 3 wellhead fires have been extinguished, and they are working on the remaining 6 wellheads that were set ablaze when the regime retreated. These oil fields are critical to the future and the prosperity of Iraq. It's estimated it will cost around $1 billion to get the oil infrastructure to allow the field to yield its capacity of about 1.8 million barrels a day. And we expect that Iraq will be exporting oil within 3 months as part of the Oil for Food programme. Apart from providing close air support to ground operations, the Royal Air Force has been flying around 100 sorties a day. In addition to our offensive sorties, our tankers and our AWACS play a key supporting role in the coalition air effort. Our Tornado GR-4s and Harrier GR-7s have attacked targets ranging from regime headquarters, ammunition dumps, airfields, integrated air defense system installations, and Iraqi fielded forces. Meanwhile, the RAF Tornado F-3s have been providing fighter patrols to protect airfields, land forces, and high-value air assets. The Joint Helicopter Force, including RAF Chinooks and Pumas, Royal Navy Sea Kings and Army Lynx, have been supporting ground and maritime forces throughout the UK area of operations. And the RAF Regiment have been providing airfield security to Allied airfields, providing short-range air defence, and have also deployed into Iraq to protect a forward operating base for helicopter operations. UK forces will continue to make a significant contribution to all aspects of coalition operations across the whole theatre until we achieve our objectives.
You are listening to a press conference at CENTCOM. We are having an audio problem with it. I think we're going to stick with it and try to get it fixed. Let's just continue listening.
To show our audience the truth, even it is dirty war. We are in Al Jazeera not a part of a coalition nor a part of the Iraqi regime. We are independent media. Thank you.
That was your statement, was it, or was there a question there? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Did you ask a question?
I have no question.
You have no question. Let me just say in response that I know that Al Jazeera's management wants to produce a station which they can be proud of. They want to produce a station that engages in balanced reporting. That type of reporting is neither balanced, nor should anybody take any pride in it. Take it from me.
Kevin Dunn of ITV News. Air Marshal, can I ask you about the overnight engagement outside Basra? Can you give us more details on the outcome of that? And do you assess that regular Iraqi forces have now abandoned Basra? And what kind of resistance is there? And when will you be able to assure the civilian population that you're going to go in and relieve the town?
Okay. Several questions there, but let me paint the tapestry. What we have in a city like Basra, 1.3 million people, is the classic mosaic of the regime's security procedures. They've got various different organisations, such as the Special Security Organisation, the Ba'ath Militia, the odd Fayadeen, but not probably many. But they are paramilitaries who live above the law, have ruled the roost for years, and they just see that the only way they can work this is to intimidate the regular army who have already deserted. And they're doing that by exemplar executions. They're doing that by executing families of the soldiers concerned. So that's the atmosphere that's in there. So on the one hand, we've got to deal with that, and we are. On the other hand, there is existing still this climate of fear that the regime built up over many, many years, and it takes a huge effort to win the hearts and minds of people who have been subjected to that sort of fear over that length of time. And that is what we're going to do, and we will take as long as it takes. And the most important thing is to keep reassuring the people of Basra that we're there, and that's what we're doing, and they're seeing it.
Yeah, Jonathan Marcus, BBC. Could you tell us, please, you've said that you expected resistance from these irregular formations. Could you tell us whether you think the level of the resistance and the doggedness of the resistance is indeed more than you had expected? And can you give us a little bit of a picture of what is happening, obviously outside the British area, further to the northwest?
Sure. It was always going to be hard to judge because we're dealing with intangibles here. We knew how the regime would seek to apply friction to our progress, and the fact that we're using or we're seeing irregular forces, and we're particularly seeing the activity against deserting regular forces by those security apparatuses, that isn't surprising. What is always difficult to judge is the degree to which the view of the people, if you like, will or will not triumph over that. It depends on the degree of fear they've been under, as I've said, and I think we'll find in different places that equation is balanced differently. So not really surprised about the way in which these irregular forces are being used, but they are nevertheless dangerous and determined men who need sorting out, and sorting out they will. You wanted something on the bigger picture. Let me simply say that the end state for this campaign is the removal of weapons of mass destruction. In order to do that, we've got to remove the regime. The regime lives in Baghdad, therefore the center of gravity of this campaign is Baghdad. Number of lines of operation to allow us to do that. The conventional line of operation you're seeing plenty of, with the classic use of maneuver using armor, the classic use of air power, and an unconventional line of operation, which is the sort of thing I've been talking about in Basra. And our forces are moving into position to reach that end state. I'm sorry I can't go into huge amounts of detail on that. Over there, please, glasses.
Independent. Can I just ask you, Air Marshal Burridge, if you can tell us any more about the small arms fire that you say was fired by some of the civilians in Basra the other night? In other words, what kind of group or grouping it was? And also, just on the picture that Jonathan just asked you about outside the British area, the Iraqi division seem to have been moving south. Can you tell us what you think they're up to and why they're doing it?
It's very hard to say with any degree of certainty what the ground truth is of the sort of situation that started off in Basra, but I would guess, and I mean an educated guess based on my knowledge and understanding of these situations, is that probably someone the Ba'ath Party were trying to intimidate wasn't going to be intimidated, and so they shot him. And that's the way of these things. In counterinsurgency warfare, that tends to be the way these things start to get unhinged, because someone develops either the courage or the recklessness occasionally to fight back and say, no, I'm not going to put up with this. And your other question was...
The other question was Iraqi divisions moving south overnight, and why they're doing it. And
I'm not convinced that there is what you and I would perhaps call a division moving anywhere. I think they're inevitable. It's very fluid. I mean, I describe it as probably the classic ambiguous battle space, but I sense that what we're seeing is people trying to surrender, desert, or whatever, realizing what's going on with the Ba'ath Party and the others who are trying to apply their motivation and trying to avoid them. It's a very difficult and confused situation. Sorry, you're being very patient.
Peter Hunt, BBC News. Time and again at that podium, people like yourself and the Americans insist that the resistance you are experiencing on the ground was predictable. Time and again we hear a different story from commanders in the field talking to embedded journalists who express surprise. Would you accept that you both underestimated the nature of the resistance and misrepresented the nature of this war to the British audience and the international audience watching this news conference live? I
don't believe that... I can speak for myself, I can speak for the UK. I don't believe we've misrepresented, if you're talking about military spokesmen, I don't believe we've misrepresented anything. We give you the best ground truth as we see it. The fact is that we now understand what's going on in Basra to a greater degree than clearly we could have predicted on the basis of it's actually going on, if you see what I mean. And as I said to a previous question, until you actually see what's happening, it's very difficult to make judgments. I'm interested what you say about what forces are saying to the embeds, because that's not what's coming back to me. Commanders recognise what's going on, so British commanders recognise what's going on and act accordingly. Let's come over here.
Yeah, Neil Karlinski with ABC News. We know there's concern in Baghdad that buildings will be booby-trapped to kill large numbers of coalition troops moving through the area. Have you seen any evidence of anything like that in Basra or any of these other places?
Well, I've seen it on, classic example is in the oil infrastructure, where many of the wellheads and the control mechanisms were indeed set for demolition, and that's why we've had to be very careful in the way in which we've dealt with it, and we anticipate precisely that anywhere else. This is the way irregular forces operate. Sorry, I need to move on. Yeah, sorry, yeah, go.
Yes, Tom Intier with CNN, Air Marshal. We have been given the indication that this is a rather unorganized group in Basra, but you're telling us today that 2 columns of armor, APCs, tanks, made their way out of Basra to engage UK forces. How would you rate the opposition in Basra at this hour?
Don't get me wrong. I mean, picture the scene. These militias, probably the Ba'ath Party militia, go through a neighborhood, round up the existing soldiery, put them in their tanks and say, go that way. And you can tell from the way they're dispossessed operationally that this isn't a fighting formation that really knows its business. That's the way it is. It is disorganized, but there is someone in there trying to organize it. It's totally different from that conventional line of operation that I referred to, where you are actually dealing with forces who can maneuver, forces who have intelligence, forces who have a picture on which to go. So it's very different from that.
Sky News. We're in the second week of this now. We're constantly being told in this room that everything's on track, on the timeline. Are you seriously telling us that you're exactly where you want it to be without a single major centre of population under coalition control? Are you coming under, or what kind of political pressure are you coming under to get a move on and deliver the sort of victories, the quick victories, on which public support was so conditional?
I think the military mind, seeing a city of 1.3 million people, in which you know a security apparatus has been operating for a long time, it was quite clear that that was never going to be quick. I mean, we sadly have enormous experience in Belfast, and we know how fluid these situations can become and how it isn't like turning on a light switch. So, you know, forgive me, this is the way we think, and we tend to think on the basis of our previous experience, and we tend to think conservatively. As for coming under political pressure, no, none at all. You've heard me say this many times, this will take as long as it takes. Military campaigning does, and that's the way it is. And you know, we're not playing out to some sort of script for the benefit of anybody. It takes as long as it takes. It's got to be that way.
Abu Dhabi Television. I have a simple question.
Sorry, I missed your company.
Abu Dhabi Television.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a simple question. You mentioned something about Iraq will be able to resume oil exporting in 3 months.
Yeah.
Do you expect the war will be over in this time period?
Well, that's a very interesting question. But given that we have secured the oil fields in the south, if they were a modern set of oil fields, as we see anywhere else in the Gulf, we could be pumping now. The fact is they're in terrible condition and they need to be made safe, and obviously there's damage from the fires. But the civil engineering part of that will take 3 months, and at that stage we can flow oil, and that's in a secure area.
But you were speaking about South oil wells, or all Iraqi?
I'm only speaking about the south because it's only the south that's in the British area, and I'm not an oil expert, as you can probably tell.
Jeff Schaefer, Associated Press Television News. We keep hearing from the podium that the conflict that's so far been waged by the coalition has the Iraqi leadership on the run, in disarray. I mean, what evidence do you have, if you call Baghdad the center of gravity, that the leadership is in disarray? Have there been any high-level defections? And do you still believe that Saddam Hussein is firmly in place, is still running the war effort from his side? Second question, completely different. There's news that broke about 10 minutes ago, early reports of a friendly fire episode in Nasiriyah involving U.S. Marines. Can you speak to that at all?
Take your second question first. I mean, I've been standing here for half an hour, so I'm afraid I can't. And in any effect, US actions would take rather longer to reach me as the UK commander. On your first point, the degree to which the Iraqi regime has control, there are a number of indications, and I would start right from the beginning with the way they're seemingly not reacting to events with the disposition of their forces. Were the positions reversed, then I'm afraid I'd have my corps and armoured divisions in a very different disposition, and I'm surely not going to tell you what that is. But there are signs that the reaction to events is poor. There are also signs that they are finding it exceedingly difficult to maintain communication amongst themselves and thereby exercise command and control. But actually, it doesn't, individuals don't matter to me. All I'm interested in is knowing that we've cracked the regime and they're no longer there, they're no longer in a position to do anything, and that's what we're after.
Brian, Bob Roberts from the Daily Mirror. You mentioned the British dead. Can you also give us your reaction to the innocent civilians killed in Baghdad yesterday, and would you like to apologise to their family and friends?
Are you referring to anything in particular?
The residential building.
Okay, I'm not actually aware of what you're referring to, but you know that
bombing which killed more than 20 people.
Right. Okay. First of all, it is by no means clear, and there's quite an extensive investigation going on to see what was the cause of that. Secondly, as you know well, because I've explained it to you, we go to enormous lengths to avoid civilian casualties. Any deaths in civilian communities in war are regrettable. There is no doubt about that. And enormous parts of my day are spent in dealing with targets to minimize that risk. And it's a job we take very seriously. It's a very responsible job, and it's one I discharge with enormous attention to detail.
Rory McCarthy from The Guardian. Can you tell us who is going to run the port at Qasr? I've seen suggestions that it's going to be an American firm. Is that what you want?
Initially, we'll do it with our own military units. Subsequently, I don't know what arrangements will go into place. But in all these aspects of running infrastructure, the best outcome is that we find that the people who ran it before are still there and able to run it, rather than having to do anything else, because that's absolutely the best outcome. It's Iraqi capabilities in Iraqi hands for the benefit of the Iraqi economy. Yeah, sorry, over the back there.
Robert Hodier in Army Times. Can you give us a little more detail about this column that broke out of Basra last night? How many vehicles, what nature the vehicles were, how many of them you destroyed, and where you think the ones you didn't destroy are now? And as a follow-on to that, how do you see it working that the Ba'ath Party officials get people into tanks with machine guns and cannons and maintain an effective control and force them to go into combat?
Oh, they coerce their families. They go to their houses and hold a gun to the heads of the families. That's how it's done.
Other than the potentially self-serving statements from POWs, what evidence do you have of that?
Well, why do you say self-serving statements?
I didn't want to fight, they made me do it.
No. There is evidence. Your first question, I work at the operational level of war, so tactical detail that happened only hours ago is not something that falls on my plate. I can give you the generality, which is what I've given you, but I don't do detail of that sort.
Marshal, don't you think that British people watching at home would be very concerned to hear the commander of British forces in the Gulf say, "I don't do detail"? These are their soldiers, and indeed their sons and daughters' lives that are on the line.
No, I don't do the sort of that sort of detail in terms of putting things on a map. And make no mistake about that. My major responsibility is for the lives and minimising the risk of all UK armed forces, and I'm slightly offended that you think it would be otherwise.
Air Marshal, can you clarify whether you meant to... sorry, Jim Wolfe, Reuters. Can you clarify whether you meant to accuse Al Jazeera of a flagrant breach of the Geneva Convention, or you meant to accuse Iraq of a flagrant breach?
Iraq has the flagrant breach of the Geneva Convention on its plate. Yeah.
Tribune. What do you suppose was the military objective of this breakout from Basra? What were they trying to do? Why would they leave the cover of civilians all around them and go out and engage you folks in the night?
Sorry, why would who do that?
Why would the militia who broke out of Basra, what was their military objective? Why did they leave the city? Why would they leave the cover that they have of
The
civilians?
ones coming south? Or do you mean
the ones
one?
in Basra?
Yeah, well, there's been some coming south in armour who've come to fight. They've been made to fight. There are others who are trying to leave so they can get away for their own safety. It's as simple as that. Go on. Go on.
David Schuster from NBC News. You talked a lot about the fear that is keeping some of these forces doing what they're doing in places like Basra and the need for a rebellion against this fear. But I'm wondering, to what degree is such a rebellion going to be required for successful occupation of a place like Baghdad? And is it realistic to expect that there could be such a rebellion against fear in Iraq's capital?
I think so, because you've got two lines of operation coming together at Baghdad. You've got dealing with a city, dealing with urban warfare as we're doing in Basra, and at the same time you've got the regime collapsing, and that will act as an enormous catalyst. So the two come together at that point. Last question.
Donna Linewand from USA Today. You mentioned that you had captured a senior Ba'ath Party official. I was wondering if the UK had the opportunity to question him yet, and what sort of insight he gave you into the workings of the regime and what was actually going on where he was.
Yes, I confirm that we have caught a senior Ba'ath Party official. We have not yet conducted detailed questioning, so we as yet have no insight from that source. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to a press conference given by Brian Burridge, the British Air Marshal. A lot he covered. He started off the press conference, if you missed it, began about half an hour ago, criticizing quite directly Al Jazeera, the Arab television network, for airing what is believed to be the bodies of some British soldiers, again believed to be, and he was very critical of Al Jazeera for making the decision to air that. Also, one of the early headlines out of this press conference was that the two mines have been discovered and detonated near Qasr. They have cleared a channel, but these mines were discovered outside that channel, and the headline being, this may delay the first arrival, I believe it was the Sir Galahad that was going to arrive with some 200 tons of aid from both the UK and Kuwait. That was supposed to arrive on Thursday, but it looks like that may be delayed 24 hours.
It will be delayed until Friday. He said so many interesting things. He was talking about those tanks apparently coming from Basra towards British troops and how British troops opened fire. And believed, though, that tank brigade was trying to attack the British troops. But he said that they took care of that. He also said there was another column of tanks coming from Basra that was attempting to flee, and airstrikes also took care of that column of tanks.
And it still seems both tanks and Bradley vehicles, a wide variety of armored vehicles. And what he said basically about the situation in Basra, he said it's the classic ambiguous battle space. It is difficult and confused situation there, and is one we will be following a lot in the coming hours. It's about 2:36 a.m. here on the East Coast. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back.